Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get started in a few minutes, we would like to share a few housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted as well as keep your video off to ensure we're not taking up bandwidth. The session will be recorded. We will share the recording of this session tomorrow. Lastly, there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation. Please use the Q&A function that appears at the bottom of the screen. We will hear from CAF America President and CEO Ted Hart and guest corporate speakers Justin Land from Dow and Steve Fitzgerald from Bank of America. Just a little information about our host organization moderator. Since 1992, CAF America, the Charities Aid Foundation of America, is the leader of cross-border giving. CAF America is known for its commitment to regulatory compliance, risk management, and reputation protection. An internationally recognized speaker, Ted has over 30 years in experience in advising global philanthropy and is an expert in regulatory frameworks governing both domestic and global philanthropy and risk management. Now, I'll pass this over to Ted to introduce our speakers and begin the presentation.
Just this morning, a gentleman from Pakistan wrote to me. He wanted me to know how much he appreciated the work of CAF America because, as he said, the international pandemic has affected people all over the world. We have also suffered from the loss of lives, including our nearest relatives, leaving behind orphans and widows. Many people are looking for help from NGOs and charitable organizations. This is what drives CAF America. Since the earliest days of this global pandemic, CAF America has been collecting data and making it available to philanthropists who want to make a difference both here in the United States and around the world. For months, we have surveyed charitable organizations and donors. This has allowed us to tell the story of unfolding trends amid the disruption and uncertainty of this pandemic. We've learned how nonprofits are working hard to keep their doors open, trying to keep their staff safe while still providing life-saving and life-changing services. Along the way, we have had the privilege to be part of some amazing stories of critical philanthropic support around the world. Many of these stories involve corporate philanthropy. Time and time again, corporate philanthropy has proven to be a critical value to inform global response. This new report, The Voice of Corporate Philanthropy in Response to COVID-19 Worldwide, highlights how nimble corporate America has been. Corporations have both increased giving and increased flexibility in the use of those funds. This support is helping some charities survive, adapt, and learn to thrive through this pandemic. American corporations are listening, and it's making a difference. Today, we are honored to share with you the philanthropic expertise of Dow and Bank of America. Dow first wrote to CAF America early in the pandemic. One of the earliest emails on March 12th, which said, and I quote, "We are tracking responses from organizations in quarantined areas. While we recognize that you still need to perform your expenditure responsibility work, we would ask for flexibility with timing, changing of grant purpose, etc. with our grantees." This was Dow being a leader, showing flexibility before many were considering it. The very flexibility this report shows would go on to be adapted by 65% of their peers. On the same day, March 12th, Bank of America notified CAF America of their initial intention to commit $500,000 in response to coronavirus. They would go on, as you will hear, to add many millions more, with the first $250,000 allocated to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent and to Project Hope. 72% of corporations responding to our survey reported increasing their contributions during this period. And then, on March 19th, CAF America made its first COVID-19 global pandemic-related international grant. The grant had been advised in the amount of $200,000 to the Italian Red Cross. It was made on the very day that Italy had the sad distinction of having overtaken China as the country with the most deaths from COVID-19 at that time. That was just 5.5 months ago. As you will learn today, corporations planned ahead. They knew the initial crisis would require long-term support. American corporations have proven to be steady partners for charities in this time of need. American corporations are directing their philanthropic support so charitable organizations can meet the challenges needed by their communities, changing needs that cannot always be seen on a spreadsheet, but can be measured by the human heart. Let's go to the next slide. Justin Land, Program Officer for Dow's Global Citizenship Team. Thank you for being with us today. Dow has facilities in the Asia Pacific region. Please tell us how that helped inform what you became your team of teams approach to success.
Hey, Ted, thank you so much and happy to be here. First, I just want to give a huge shout out to you and your team at CAF America for your data-driven insights, global perspectives, and really just this convening opportunity today. I think this community as a whole is all about listening, learning, and sharing, and today is just another great example of how we can do just that. So this team of teams approach, for us, I think about this distant memory, or what seems like a distant memory, to back in February, participating on a panel discussion similar to this, hosted by our Asian Diversity Network. And it was all about our COVID response in mainland China. But very soon after, this went from local to truly a global pandemic. And this global pandemic became a connector. It connected all of Team Dow internally. And, as a whole, beyond just philanthropy and citizenship, but all of our business units as a whole have responded. So just a little bit about Dow, for those that don't know. We're based in Midland, Michigan, in a global company with a portfolio of plastics, industrial intermediates, coatings, so really the science behind paints, and silicones. And our businesses deliver a broad range of science-based products and solutions for our customers around the world, such as packaging, infrastructure, and consumer care. I'll come back to this portfolio in just a little bit because it's very relevant during our COVID response. We have operations in 109 manufacturing sites around the world and in 31 countries. And a key aspect of this, which will come up in our citizenship strategy, is how important each of these communities are for us. It's the core of who we are. And our entire workforce, approximately 36,000 employees that we like to refer to as Team Dow, are driven by our ambition to become the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable material science company in the world. And what makes me proud in our overall approach to COVID, but also all the emerging challenges that we've seen this year, is how our diverse and inclusive community of problem solvers amongst Team Dow are truly passionate about bettering the world and achieving our ambition. And this has been a driver as we've looked to overcome COVID. So if we could go to the next slide, and I want to talk just a little bit about our global citizenship strategy. And I'm sure all of you on the line are also looking at your own strategies about how have you pivoted over the course of this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So our global citizenship strategy is aligned to our ambition to be the most inclusive, customer-centric, sustainable, and innovative material science company in the world. And we have three main pillars. The first is sustainable solutions, where we're collaborating to drive progress towards a more circular economy, and also leveraging our portfolio of solutions to better the world. And in this pillar, we're really focused on engaging our businesses. The second pillar is around inclusive communities, where we're focused on creating more inclusive places to live, work, and learn. And we have a very active network of employee resource groups who are huge drivers in this all around the world. And the last pillar is around tomorrow's innovators, of how we can prepare the next generation of manufacturers, engineers, and chemists for the jobs of tomorrow. And with our workforce being manufacturers, engineers, and chemists, there's a lot of passion and love within this space to engage students of all ages. Two key aspects that aren't on this slide that are critical drivers as we look forward. is the intersection of engaging for impact and how important Team Dow is to drive success forward. And also that importance of community, where we have a huge focus on building resilient communities as well. Both of these factors intersect all three of our priority areas. And so this year has been quite interesting, to say the least. And so we're here today to talk about COVID, but as from a team perspective, we've also had to rise up and face the challenges of a 500-year flood in our hometown of Midland, Michigan. We've all experienced cases of racism and bigotry and threats of violence because of skin color. And as companies and corporate citizens, we're responding. We've also seen the Beirut explosion, and CAF America has been critical in helping in response efforts. And last but not least, the recent Hurricane Laura has seen us have to pivot our citizenship efforts and respond. So if we go to the next slide, I do want to dive deeper into our response. So I mentioned during the intro, I remember that conversation in February where this really was a local challenge, working closely with our team in Asia Pacific. But soon after, it became that global pandemic that Ted referenced. And it became a connector. It's impacted and connected every single Dow community, site, and employee in some fashion. And it's impacted and connected every single one of us on the line as well. And this bond, at the end of the day, will, I hope and think, make us stronger. And so, there's two important pieces of our response. One is Team Dow. So I mentioned we're a collective, a group of problem solvers who are passionate about bettering the world. And second is that we're DowStrong, and it's focused on our perseverance and resilience to tackle and solve the challenges that COVID has brought. And so there's three main elements of our commitment in response to COVID. Some of these are philanthropic, some are running our business. But what we've seen, and I think everyone on the line has probably seen, is that it all intersects. First and foremost has been the safety of our employees and our communities, whether that's on the manufacturing side or R&D side, or our offices around the world. But the safety of employees and community is always our number one priority. And so to help on the safety side, one thing that we've done is shared our return to workplace playbook. It's really sharing our science-based knowledge of how we'll continue to keep our critical operations and employees safe, and our coordinated plan to carefully guide other employees who may be working from home and how we can get them back to the workplace. This is something that's new for us, really sharing our plan with community partners, other customers as well. The second main area is playing a critical role. And so we recognize through our products and solutions that the chemical sector is part of the critical infrastructure in the world's largest economies. Therefore, our manufacturing sites have been running through the COVID response. Many of our products are part of critical applications such as medical equipment and infrastructure, medical supplies and PPE, and then also personal and home hygiene and sanitation products such as detergents and disinfectants and hand sanitizers. And we found ways through all of this to repurpose our facilities. We don't typically produce hand sanitizer, but a large portion of the required raw materials are readily available at many of our sites. And so we found a way to adapt 5 Dow sites around the world to produce hand sanitizer. And we've donated hand sanitizer produced at these sites to local health systems, government agencies, and also used at our manufacturing sites to help protect employees on the front lines. And then one other area around playing a critical role is some of the customer collaboration we have. One example is working with Whirlpool and Reynolds Consumer Products to collaborate to manufacture and donated much needed respirators. We were able to create alternative PPE solutions to quickly address diminishing supply of N95 respirators and masks for healthcare workers. And an aspect of that, we're able to donate 1,000 respirators to healthcare facilities in Louisiana, Michigan, and Texas. And so this is part of the thinking that aligns to our ambition on working with our customers, focusing on inclusion and sustainability. And last but not least, which is traditionally looked at as the citizenship and CSR space, is how we're supporting that global community. First and foremost, partnership has been key. Partnering with nonprofits, including CAF America, thank you, thank you, thank you. And additionally to governments and businesses around the world, we've been able to help and aid frontline workers and also our communities around the world. One aspect that Ted referenced very early on is some of the communication we have with grantees. We foresaw that COVID-19 was going to bring a high level of challenge. And so we've been working very closely with current grantees in the United States and around the world to really understand their challenges, but also to allow for revised grant purposes. We've delayed some new measurement initiatives and really offer some flexibility and grace during this time. Not only is this important for individuals and coworkers, but also for our partners around the world. I think we've all seen the stresses and impact on the nonprofit sector. From a financial standpoint, we committed up to this point approximately $3.7 million. Initially, there was a focus on global relief organizations and global relief efforts with the World Health Organization and direct relief, but also a significant emphasis on local and regional nonprofit organizations in our communities around the world. I mentioned early on about how important Team Dow is. And so we've worked on different ways to engage Team Dow, and it hasn't been easy. None of this has been easy, but that's not why we're in this business. And so we stood up a COVID-19 workplace giving campaign. We didn't know how we were going to do it because it was not your traditional workplace giving campaign. There was a lot of duct tape, a lot of different partners involved, including CAF America. And in the end, through about 600 donations and a network of nearly 60 global and regional organizations, we were able to engage Team Dow in raising $130,000 and matching dollar for dollar. But the key thing in this is that it's taken a lot of work. It's taken a lot of duct tape to innovate our efforts. And that will continue to evolve. Another, I think we started looking at some of the challenges, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but volunteerism and community needs will continue to arise. And just one that I want to point out that I learned firsthand last week volunteering outside of Philadelphia. One of our partners runs a free mobile farmers market, and the number of their guests has tripled since April to about 1,400 to 1,500 families a week. And these fresh fruits and vegetables are critical in addition to the emergency food boxes and household items that they are distributing. From a back to school perspective, they're serving 20% more students and 43% more families in terms of donated school supplies that are in such need right now. So the need is going to continue to grow, and look forward to the discussion with Ted and Steve on that front shortly. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over.
Justin, thank you so much. Before we have you move on to Bank of America, I just do want to talk to you a little bit further. You had mentioned as we were talking before we started that Dow has supported more than 60 nonprofits in nearly every community that you've been involved with. Can you share with us a little bit about what you have learned in supporting those nonprofits, about the nonprofit communities that you're supporting?
Sure, thank you. And those 60 organizations are really focused just on our workplace giving campaign, but we are serving countless organizations globally and locally. And so I think some of the things that we're hearing, one is the delivery of programs that we initially sought out for may not be feasible, may not be possible right now. The time might not be right. And we're giving that, that grace that I shared. Another thing is around volunteerism. Organizations are really struggling to figure out how traditional volunteerism can happen in a safe way. But this is also significantly impacting not just companies, but also programs as well. And virtual volunteering can't solve it all. And then I think the last thing, and it goes back to the stat that I raised, is this tremendous growth in basic needs. And we're going to continue to have to monitor this space and react in those areas.
Thank you very much, Justin. To have Steve Fitzgerald, Senior Vice President, Bank of America Charitable Foundation with us. Steve, you've referred to this as a humanitarian crisis. And Bank of America certainly has shown its ability to pivot quickly. Can you walk us through what Bank of America has done to really make a difference?
Well, thanks, Ted. And Justin, that was great information. And it's great to see the response from so many different corporate entities because, as we know, this is something that all of us have to be actively engaged in to address. So I thought what I'd do is a couple of things. Start with our company's purpose. And then as we get into our response to the coronavirus, really talk about it around three sort of important planks. You know, our teammates, our clients, and of course our communities, which we'll go into as we have further discussion. But it all starts with our company's purpose, which you see here on the slide. And very simply, it is to help make financial lives better, to do it sustainably, but also to ensure that we're working with those organizations and those clients and communities to really advance overall economic mobility for both individuals and families as we really create prosperity for everybody. And if we move to the next slide, that really helped serve us well and continues to be the work that we build upon as we looked at coronavirus, something that we had never confronted, none of us, in such a magnitude and such speed that it was important for our company to really respond and to address the very issues that presented themselves through this pandemic. First and foremost, similar to Justin, was the support for our associates and our teammates. It was extremely important that we ensure the overall safety and well-being of our teammates as they served our clients. And so a company of several 100,000 associates quickly transferred to a virtual delivery. All of us, the vast majority of us, are still working from a remote location, except for the most critical associates on the front lines in our financial centers and other locations. But you'll see, as we talk about financial centers, the transformation that has occurred, just like so many other businesses. The look of those centers are in response to the safety and to ensure the safety of our associates. And so to do that in a way that allows us to continue to meet the financial services that our communities and our clients rely on was paramount. Secondly is our clients. As we looked at the pandemic and the predicament it was creating for businesses, for individuals, for companies, it was important for us to launch and deliver our client assistance program that really looked at deferrals, forbearance, fee forgiveness, to really allow those individuals and in organizations that were facing an abrupt loss of income from jobs, revenue from businesses that suddenly had to stop seemingly in a day. It was important that we provide a robust response and solutions. I think a great example from a small business purview is when the passage of the CARES Act and the mobilization that our teammates delivered in responding to this and really getting capital and liquidity into the markets quickly. I'm really proud to say that our company at this point has provided over 334,000 payment protection program loans to businesses across our country, estimated at over $25 billion. And so as we look at the two legs of that stool, the third leg, of course, is the communities in which we work. And you'll see on this slide where our philanthropic efforts really became paramount to serving the needs of these communities. We committed $100 million in philanthropic support in addition to the already $250 million that our company delivers on an annual basis. But it really was delivered with the intentionality and through the information of our key partners globally, across the globe, across our country, in our communities, to let us know what were they seeing, what were the needs, and really helped us crystallize our strategy quite rapidly around the sort of the 6 basic areas. Increased medical response, addressing the food insecurity. You heard Justin talk about that previously. That was something that we saw playing out in large large and small communities across our global footprint. Housing security, access to learning. I mean, we are now seeing in different communities our schools opening up in different capacities. And to be able to support access to learning as a result of these closures and this new approach is ever so important. As this slide indicates, and you'll see it in there, it was also important for us to support our arts community because, as we know, many of them still remain dark at this moment. And to be able to support them as they navigated and repurposed their delivery, primarily digitally now, was extremely important. They play a significant role in our communities. They are economic drivers. And so support to that community was equally important to us. And obviously, as we looked at our response, serving the most vulnerable, the elderly, the homeless, those who are often in good times at risk. And when a pandemic such as this manifested itself, it impacted communities in such tremendous ways. I think it's also to point out, if you look to the bottom left of this slide, our commitment to the CDFI industry, which in the US is a significant purveyor of capital to small businesses and nonprofits alike in underserved communities. We quickly stepped up with another $250 million in capital, as well as $10 million in philanthropic support. Similar to Dow, we too looked at ways by which we could leverage our supply chain, and at this point have donated more than 4 million masks to organizations in need. We continue to identify organizations at this moment to continue to deliver the various equipment and PPE that is still needed as we confront the coronavirus. And so this really just gives sort of, I hope, a quick snapshot of our comprehensive and thoughtful approach that were really informed by many of our nonprofits, by CAF America, your voice of corporate philanthropy, really allowing us to not only expand our philanthropy, change some of the parameters, reduce some of the process so that we could quickly get this funding out on the street. We streamlined our applications, increased our engagement to review these applications so that When we announced this commitment sometime in early March, by May, we had already approved in the first 60 days in excess of $70 million. We're now at over 91 million and climbing. And so it's going to be important for us to continue to listen to our clients, to listen to our nonprofit and our NGOs across the globe to really make sure that we're addressing all of the needs as we begin to rebuild our economy, which is, as we know, still in great need of growth, and will be some time before we really get back to pre-pandemic levels. If we could move to the next slide. The next two slides are just put some context to those numbers, both at a national and a local level. Our work with addressing the food insecurity, addressing populations. I think all of us are aware of the impact that the pandemic really had on communities of color, none more than in the United States, our Native American communities, and addressing those needs quickly was important to us. The next slide shows some of our examples outside of the United States. Again, very similar issues, challenges around food security, isolation, and just basic human needs that every community across the globe was confronted with. And being able to provide that support in a timely and ongoing and nimble fashion, I think was really something I'm most proud of our company. And we continue to look at the needs, and we'll continue to look at how we can support organizations like these you've seen, and countless thousands others addressing on the front lines the issues brought on by this pandemic. The next slide takes a little bit of a look of where we're headed. As mentioned earlier, it's really important that we continue to adapt our philanthropy to support the challenges that we see being presented, not only short-term, but also the long-term economic recovery. We are all aware of the recent incidences that are playing out across our communities that really have raised the issue of racial inequality to the fore. And so our company has recently announced a $1 billion commitment to really address this and not only advance racial equality and economic opportunity, but do it in a way that is comprehensive and spans across Bank of America. It will not only include our philanthropic delivery around these key economic mobility pillars, but it will also leverage the vast resources of our company, but also to look at our own internal operations as we look at our own hiring practices, our leadership development, and other components that really get to the core and really move forward on this, what seems to be an ever present challenge that we seem to be facing on a daily basis. And of course, for us to do that, it's important that we continue to develop our ongoing partnerships, both at a local level, our national level, and our global partners. If we're really going to drive meaningful solutions, it has to engage those key individuals who are so innovative in approaching the issues confronting them. And of course, we'll always continue to support our employees and what they care about and their passions, so that we can continue to make Bank of America a great place to work. So I think I'll stop there, Ted, and turn it back to you or the moderator.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that, Steve. I did want to ask you, and I want to remind all of our guests today, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see where you can post a question We are now shortly going to go into the Q&A portion. Let's move on to the next slide. We just want to share with all of our folks today some other resources that CAF America has available. And during the global pandemic, it really all started with our eligible organizations. 56 countries around the world. CAF America is constantly updating this list of charities on the ground providing COVID-19 relief and response on the ground in 56 countries. And so this is a searchable database on our website. You can also find all of our research and all of our surveys, all the webinars and podcasts that we have been doing since the beginning of this global pandemic, providing up-to-date surveys and information regarding information that you can use and what donors need. Let's go to the next slide, which is just for Q&A. And gentlemen, you have been very thought-provoking because there are a lot of questions that people have. So we're going to get straight to the questions that we have and try to get to as many of them as we can in the time still remaining. First question to both of you. Given the Business Roundtable's relatively recent statement on the purpose of a corporation, many companies reacted by demonstrating greater alignment of CSR activities with their core business capabilities. Did the pandemic abruptly alter the direction of this alignment in terms of philanthropic giving? Justin, Steve.
Yeah, I don't
go ahead, Justin. You go
first. I think what's really unique about the pandemic is that, the pandemic itself was abrupt, but when it comes down to direction and alignment, it actually has made us a pretty strong company, where our, the retooling of our manufacturing lines to make hand sanitizer, which then was donated to local health centers in some of our communities. That's a pretty powerful thing when you connect business and philanthropy. And so I actually think we've seen a lot more shared value approaches than we've ever seen before. And COVID-19 has done that. We also saw it with the Midland floods in our corporate headquarters town as well, where the entire company, all of Team Dow, has joined together for business and social good.
So this is Steve. I would add that similarly, I don't know if it fundamentally changed. Our strategy, I think, helped inform us, and actually, I think, helped us respond quicker because of the strategy that we had and we're building on. It did certainly require us to expand that scope and look at this from a total humanitarian response, and to that end, really leverage the resources in a more robust fashion than might have been prior to the pandemic. But certainly it did provide us an opportunity to expand some of our philanthropy, but it was grounded in this notion that, if we're going to make communities better, we've got to advance mobility. And so this allowed us, I think, in many ways to be able to respond quickly and also learn how we can tweak that strategy. But I think overall, it was the principle that I talked about earlier that sort of allowed us to really dive deep into these communities with our key partners who were addressing some of these issues, but not at quite the level that they are now.
Gentlemen, next question. Both Bank of America and Dow reacted very quickly to the pandemic, not only with their giving, but also by shifting strategies. The question is, how was the decision-making process that guided your giving different during the pandemic than before the pandemic?
This is Steve. I'll start and then turn it over to Justin. I think the decision-making, we had to accelerate it. And we had to really engage folks who were on the ground, leading these different markets to ensure that we could be responsive, but at the same time do this in a very quick turnaround so that we can really get the funding out into the hands of the individuals who desperately needed it at that time. So I think that was probably, from my perspective, one of the biggest shifts was how quickly we were able to sort of centralize, take a look at all of these communities in a process that was well informed, but yet allowed us to react probably quicker than we ever would prior to the pandemic.
I'd say for us at Dow, it's very, very similar. Speed in any disaster is really critical, but it needs to be informed on fact and what you know. And so we did a lot of listening very quickly with our teams around the world. And then the other, big challenge is the scale of this global pandemic. And so we wanted to make sure there was some sort of guidance and that we can provide to our local teams to really make a difference in each community. And so, speed and scale, that was the big thing. But I'd say outside of your traditional philanthropy mindset, what COVID-19 has done around Dow is really create a little bit more of this team of teams approach. And so Citizenship was really connecting a lot more with the broader public affairs teams, partnering and coordinating with government affairs, R&D, operations, supply chain, HR, business lines, C-suite. And so the silos really had to be torn down in our response overall.
Gentlemen, there's several questions that are coming in that are similar. So Kevin, Ravi, Sue, I'm going to kind of blend those questions together. They're similar around the notion of during the COVID-19 sort of the disruptions, many nonprofits are having a very hard time adapting to the situations. How can Bank of America and Dow help during this time? How can they help strengthen nonprofits? Or as one person said, how can they help nonprofits stay in place or rise again?
I think one of the keys is to be flexible with the funding. And that's something at Bank of America we have done and allowed our nonprofit partners and our around the globe to inform us how best they could utilize the funding to address these needs. So that's probably my quick answer is flexibility and to understand that we're going to see financial statements that are going to reflect this disruption, and we should be aware of that and really work closely with our partners as they look to build, their financial, their balance sheets and their revenue streams back to prior. But I think flexibility, listening, and understanding that there are so many nonprofits that are facing similar situation.
Yeah, I think when you look at the landscape, and I talked about how COVID is this connector, and the detriment of COVID is that every single one of us are impacted in some way, either at the individual level or organizational level. And I don't think there's anybody out there that that's can't look at the small business community or the NGO community or even the corporate community to say that we're immune. And so I think as we look at our partnerships around the world, continuing to have truthful and healthy discussions about what the needs are. Is it going to solve it all? Probably not. but the dialogue is critical to understand how we can each help each other through this. I think according to Ravi's statement here, there is some optimism about becoming that phoenix and rising again, but it's going to take all of us.
So there's another question here about risk appetite and compliance in the international space. Is there flexibility that can be had there, or are there some standards that flexibility doesn't allow?
I would say, this is where our partnership with CAF America has been so critical to help us mitigate a lot of the risk. We're fairly conservative when it comes to how much risk we want to take when it comes to our philanthropic thing. But the flip side of that is we also want to support the greatest needs out there. But governance is something that's important for us as we look across the board within our philanthropic giving. And as I mentioned, CAF America has been a great partner for us to achieve that.
Yeah, I would agree with what was said. I think our experience is working with partners and that long-term partnership that many of us have with our NGOs and nonprofits. That partnership is really what's going to get us through so much of this uncertainty, because I think there's a level of trust that one will have to have, smartly applied to recognize that these partners that have been in these communities for so long will be good stewards of these resources. And we just have to help as best we can and where it makes the most sense.
Trust and understanding is maybe a good way to segue into another important topic that was raised today, and that's incorporating social justice considerations into philanthropic strategy, which is another topic that is rightfully being brought to the forefront during this global crisis. What strategies are your companies beginning to bring forward?
So inclusion for us is part of our ambition, and we've made great strides over the past couple of years to really focus more on inclusion, engage our ERGs, but it's also not enough. And so this year we've really made a conscious effort to say that we have to act, and we have to act now. And so we've developed a strategic framework that we call Dow Act, that outlines a set of new actions that we'll take to hopefully move the needle and put forth further actions that will accelerate us towards our mission. So the three aspects of Dow Act: one is focused on advocacy. So we're looking to establish a cross-functional social justice council to monitor matters of inequality and advise us on our response. We're looking to drive policy changes and engage at the US state and federal levels, including with the Congressional Black Caucus, and directing funds to organizations dedicated to fighting racial injustice. And then also we're going to be providing time off for all employees for voting in the US, and leveraging our ERGs for voter registration campaigns. From a community perspective, we also know that we have a voice and an action, and we're responding to this no different than another crisis that we may see. And we've kind of talked about it, where our response to racism and racial inequality should be no different to a flood or to COVID-19. And so we're recommitting through our Dow Promise grant program to positively impact Black communities near our locations. We're including MLK Day as a US paid holiday and an opportunity for a day of service. And this is something that we should have done a long time ago. And then also we're ensuring our procurement practices eliminate any barriers for Black-owned and all minority-owned enterprises. And the last is around talent. In our 2019 inclusion report, Black employees made up 8.5% of our US population. And that is below the US Census Bureau estimates for the US population. And so the efforts to improve representation include ensuring a strong focus on retention and development of our Black employees, building a more diverse talent pipeline for Dow in our industry, redoubling our efforts to maximize the impact of existing diversity recruiting programs, and last but not least, requiring racial equity and advanced inclusion training for all leaders and HR professionals at Dow. The key piece here is we must act, and we must act fast and quickly.
Yeah, and that's really, as I mentioned, we understand that the urgency is now, and we cannot let it sort of quiet down at all. And that's really, if you look at our $1 billion commitment over 4 years, it really is very comprehensive, and also looks at not only how are we addressing racial equality internally and having courageous conversations. We have them regularly within our company to really bring this issue and keep it at the forefront of our company around our hiring practices, our leadership development programs, and really building a company that everybody can bring their true self to. But it's also how are we going to address these issues in leveraging our partners, because it's really important that, you know, from our perspective, it's important that we continue to raise these issues that are impeding our nation's progress and our, you know, and really the global progress, and really seek solutions for long-term change. And so we're going to continue to work with our partners across all our sectors in the civil rights, criminal justice, and the advocacy and public policy arenas to really bring our voice to these conversations, but also to do this in a way that reflects our own business practices within our company. So there's a lot to be done, but it's really important for us that we take a very visible and continued stand on addressing racial equality and economic mobility for the, you know, for all the things that we've seen. It's really something that, you know, we've got to look for long-term change and find solutions that produce this long-term change.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, in the report, The Voice of Corporate Philanthropy in Response to COVID-19 Worldwide, a greater collaboration with workforce and decision-making was elevated as one of the changes that was coming about within corporations. Can you each share some specific initiatives or some specific ways in which your workforce became more involved in the decision-making within your companies?
Well, I think it's part of our, you know, the culture within Bank of America to really ensure that our associates have a voice in not only their development, but in the way that we deliver on our purpose. And so we have, for a number of years now, you know, it's really important for us. You know, we will survey our associates every year to identify, you know, where are we doing well, where aren't we doing well within our own policy, our own workplace, to really make this a great place to work. And so those that feedback that we get is something that is taken and then really driven out across our company for each, the teams at the most senior leadership down to different managerial levels, to really act upon them. Because if we're going to be a great place to work, then we have to listen to the voice of our most important asset, and that's our associates.
I think, in addition to what Steve just shared, the passion of our employees and the passion of Team Dow really does shine and steers a lot of our decisions. We've seen this with Dow Act and how active our employee resource groups are in really bringing social impact. We see this also in disaster and Hurricane Laura right now. Team Dow really wanting to rally together and help each other, help fellow colleagues. We see this from financial donations to volunteerism to also helping guide philanthropic decisions. And so that's probably one of my favorite things about Team Dow is a willingness to act, our willingness to embrace our ambition, to focusing on inclusion, focusing on sustainability, and tackling these big issues with customers and partners like many of you on the line. So, I think Steve, you referenced it very well in saying that we have to listen, and our employees want to share and they want to be heard, and we have to do that.
I want to thank Justin Land, Program Officer with Dow Global Citizenship Team, and Steve Fitzgerald of Bank of America for being our guests here on our webinar today, and for all of you for joining us today on this webinar as we shared information and expertise regarding the voice of corporate philanthropy in response to COVID-19 worldwide. Thank you for being our guest here today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ted, and thank you, everyone, and thank our speakers. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we will follow up to share the recording of this webinar. Thank you again for participating.